Hello, everyone, and welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're digging into a piece of digital folklore that literally everyone in the space has heard of, but honestly, very few people actually understand. We are talking about the legendary Bitcoin Pizza Day of May 2010. For most folks, it's just a funny punchline, right? A guy who spent what would now be hundreds of millions of dollars on a couple of Papa John's pizzas. But as we're going to see today in these 4 Bitcoin facts most people don't know, the real hidden history is just so much more fascinating than the headline. Okay, let's dive right into this. On one side, you've got this surface-level myth. A hungry programmer spends 10,000 Bitcoin on a single isolated dinner. But the hidden truth? An estimated 40,000 Bitcoin was actually spent. That completely shatters the idea that this was just a one-off mistake or some sudden late-night craving for fast food. There's a much deeper story happening here, and it was actually driven by deliberate, calculated experimentation.
So here's our roadmap for today. We'll briefly touch on the famous myth, and then uncover our 4 surprising facts: the 40,000 Bitcoin reality, Satoshi's secret role, how the first market price was invented, and the Lightning Network return. Finally, we'll wrap up by looking at how this event actually helped forge a global asset.
Let's start with part 1, the famous Pizza Day myth, 2 pizzas for 10,000 Bitcoin. Which brings us right into our first big revelation. Fact 1, 40,000 Bitcoin, and the experiment continues. Just to quickly set the baseline, back in 2010, programmer Laszlo Hanyecz made history. He jumped onto an early online forum and offered 10,000 Bitcoin to literally anyone who would order him 2 pizzas. Someone actually took him up on it, creating the very first documented real-world purchase using Bitcoin. But that initial 10,000 Bitcoin purchase, that wasn't the end of the story. 40,000. Laszlo didn't just stop and eat his dinner. He repeated the experiment. Based on on-chain evidence and historical accounts, he kept offering this trade and ended up buying up to 8 pizzas in total. He spent roughly 40,000 Bitcoin just to prove that this digital money could consistently work in the real world. Now, you might be wondering, how on earth did he afford to throw around that much Bitcoin? Well, consider this number, 80,000. Laszlo was a massive pioneer in his own right. He was one of the very first people to mine Bitcoin using a GPU, a computer graphics card, instead of just a standard laptop processor. Because of that major innovation, it's estimated he mined around 80,000 BTC himself. So he had vast funds at his disposal, and he was absolutely ready to test them out. Historian Pete Rizzo summed up Laszlo's true motivation perfectly with this quote: "What Satoshi wanted was people to transact." Laszlo wasn't just some hungry programmer making a giant financial blunder. He was a visionary. He realized that a currency is basically completely useless if it's just sitting on a hard drive doing nothing. This was a deliberate, conscious effort to push this weird, niche internet project out into the real world. Let's move on to fact 2, Satoshi's secret role, the pizza blueprint. When we look closely at the archives, there is a totally fascinating connection here. If you dig deep into the Internet Archives, you'll find the earliest version of the Bitcoin.org website, which was built by Satoshi Nakamoto and early contributor Marty Malmy. They had an FAQ section, and guess what exact example they used to explain how digital money could work in the real world? Pizza. No joke. They literally planted the idea of buying pizza with Bitcoin on the project's very first website. It's like Pete Rizzo points out. Pizza Day is almost a collaboration between Satoshi and Laszlo. Satoshi and Laszlo were actually talking on those early forums, and Satoshi was personally encouraging Laszlo to do something active with his holdings. So Laszlo very likely took direct inspiration from Satoshi's own writing. This wasn't some random coincidence. It was a collaborative spark meant to ignite a global network. All right, fact 3, the first Bitcoin price. Inventing market value. We have to remember, back in early 2010, there were no crypto exchanges. None. Bitcoin had absolutely zero established market price. So how do you price something that doesn't actually have a market? Well, an early community member known as New Liberty Standard figured out a brilliant, highly relatable way to literally invent price discovery from scratch. Step 1, he looked at his own utility bill to figure out the raw electricity cost of mining the coins. Step 2, he calculated an exchange rate based purely on that energy expenditure. And step 3, he established the very first baseline, valuing it at roughly 1,600 Bitcoin per single US dollar. And here's the incredible payoff to that math. When you calculate that electricity cost out, that very first price equated to roughly 0.0008 cents per Bitcoin, not even a full penny. So, when Laszlo spent 10,000 Bitcoin for a $25 pizza order, he wasn't overpaying. He was actually acting in total alignment with the only rough mathematical value the community had managed to figure out at the time. Next up is Fact 4, Lightning Network Return and How History Repeats Itself. One of my absolute favorite parts of this story is that Laszlo wasn't just a one-hit wonder who vanished after 2010. He actually remained part of the technological evolution of the space. To grasp what he did next, you just need a quick understanding of the Lightning Network. Think of it as a Layer 2 solution built on top of Bitcoin, specifically designed to solve scaling issues. It allows payments to be processed much faster and drastically cheaper, making everyday, small transactions actually viable. Look at how beautifully this whole history builds on itself. In 2009, the Bitcoin FAQ explains digital money using pizza. In 2010, Laszlo completes the first real-world transaction on the main network for pizza. Then, fast forward a full 8 years to 2018. The Lightning Network goes live, and who shows up to test it? Laszlo. He returns to make history a second time, completing one of the very first real-world transactions on the Lightning Network to buy, yep, you guessed it, pizza. Even though Laszlo largely stays out of the public eye these days, he's still deeply connected to the history he helped create. Pete Rizzo shared this really charming detail recently. After Rizzo gave an induction speech at the Bitcoin Hall of Fame at a place called PubKey in New York, Laszlo actually sent him a quiet email just to let him know he had tuned in and watched it. He's still out there, watching the community grow from the seeds he literally helped plant. So let's zoom out to wrap this up. Section 6, From Pizzas to a Global Asset. The true legacy. When we take all of these 4 hidden facts together, it completely shifts how we should view May 2010. The crucial point is this: Bitcoin Pizza Day is absolutely not a punchline about a guy buying wildly expensive junk food. It was a deliberate spark designed to force real-world adoption. It was a hidden collaboration with Satoshi Nakamoto to realize the project's original vision. By calculating a price through an electricity bill and proving the network actually functioned, Laszlo laid the foundation for what is now a massive global asset held by millions around the world. Which leaves us with a pretty fascinating question to end on today. Think about how fragile this network was in its infancy. Now, 16 years later, with Wall Street institutions and entire countries adopting it, you have to ask, would Bitcoin be a global asset today if a brilliant programmer hadn't been brave enough and motivated enough to take a leap of faith, fire up his graphics card, and buy those 2 pizzas? It is just incredible to think how a simple forum post and a utility bill quite literally changed the world. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning the history behind the headlines.